This is bad news for Everton that has come to us in the last hour or so, and that is the proposed sale of Everton to Miami-based holding company 777 Partners has stalled because they failed to provide audited financial statements to the British government regulator that must approve the deal. The regulator, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, delivered its request to 777 Partners this month, according to multiple people with direct knowledge of the approval process, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they are not authorised to discuss it publicly. If the company does not provide the requested financials or an acceptable explanation, its proposed takeover of Everton could fall apart. How concerning is this for Everton?
Depends if you think them acquiring it is a good thing.
Well,
some would say that Mashiri and now his lack of appetite to want to be involved in funding a football club anymore, because there's no argument, whether it's Usmanov's money or it's Mashiri's money, that Everton has had a lot of money thrown into it, thrown at the wall and seeing how much of it sticks, like the proverbial, and hasn't, because that's why the team has been in such decline over recent years. So the departure of Mashiri is one thing. The ownership of 777 Capital is another. So I'm not entirely sure that you're not jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
Well, what are the required what are the required financials that they
source of funds? They're being asked to by the regulator. Regulator's not determining the deal.
So it's a normal request.
A source of funds is a pretty reasonable request, because ultimately under money laundering laws and source of income laws you have to be able to provide where you've got this money from.
Okay.
So it's not an unreasonable request. It's not a difficult request to comply with, unless you don't choose to, unless you have reasons that you prefer not to, because you have sources of finances that you would prefer not to be in the public domain. But going for a regulator means they're not going to be in the public domain.
Well, a source familiar with the sale process has told TalkSPORT today that without the correct financial information it is hard to work out where the money is coming from. And that's the reason, the basis of the FCA issue. Exactly, yes. So we're just saying that is the reason that we understand why it's not going to go through.
That's not a difficult box to tick.
So in which case, I mean, you mentioned it a bit as well about 777 Partners, and their history is not great. And their involvement in other football clubs has led to relegation.
And the basketball. Well, that happens. That can happen.
Yeah, but not to someone like Vasco da Gama. Not to someone.
But you've also seen I think it was the
bottom.
British Basketball Association or one of the leagues that were owed money and were having to chase 777 Capital for the money. And again, these things can happen. And of course, there are reasons why certain adverse information finds itself into the media and not the positive stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of things that this business have done that has been a very different dynamic than some of the things that we've seen. Look, for Everton, what landscape would it have changed?
Well, lots.
Well, tell me what.
Well, because at the moment, this is probably not now going to go through.
Yeah.
Mashiri, can he continue to fund the club? We know that
depends what the funding requirements are.
Well, we've got a stadium to build.
Well, that's a different dynamic entirely, because the funding for that can be easily gotten. There's not difficulty. They've already redirected £100 million of a funding from an investor that wanted to. I think it was DSP or MSC that wanted to put money into the club but didn't want to do it in a certain way, so they ended up putting it into the financing of the stadium. The stadium is a going concern. It's a secured asset that can be borrowed against, leveraged against, and financed. But we're talking about people buying the football club now, and what that difference would it have made?
Well, they need money for January transfer acquisitions if they want to stay in the league.
That depends if
they'll stay in the league anyway.
That depends if that's a requirement.
We don't know that. You can say that from an expertise
we're still at a stage.
It is a worry.
I'm not entirely sure, and maybe you, being Stato, can confirm or deny that they're out of special measures with the Premier League where they can operate without the reference to the Premier League and requirements to be able to account for every single transaction that they're doing, because they were in that recently, and they had to be able to, before they could buy, they had to sell, and the transaction had to add up to improve their balance sheet or their cash flows.
Next week, 25th of October.
No, that's the financial fair play. That's their ability to be able to have the allowable adjustments of 250 million quid to reduce them below the 105 million threshold. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Premier League put them under guidance, which said that you cannot do transactions that don't better your position, which meant in order to buy players, that's why, what's his face, the fullback, Lucas Dana, went to Everton, and Mykolenko came in because of the transaction.
Went to Villa.
Yeah, went to Villa, but the transaction on Lucas Dana improved their balance sheet because they only owed a certain amount of money on him. So if they're in that same position now still, your argument about them having somebody come in, being able to do something different in the January transfer window, may not be as pertinent as you think it is.
However,
but Mashiri does need to go.
However, there does need to be some change of A, culture, B, financial investment, if this club is to be able to survive, if it goes forward.
Yes, I think that's probably right, but that doesn't mean you jump from one bad set of circumstances to another.
Correct.
So there's always a look.
So it might be a silver cloud.
That's my point.
Or silver lining in the cloud.
That's my point. That these guys don't. I did say it from the beginning, but we've got breaks to hit, and content to fill. But I look at it from the point of view of saying, Moshiri and whoever has switched the tap off on the money, whether it's him or someone else, I've always maintained there's a real concern about where that money's come from Everton. They want to be a bit careful of how that particular lands, given what happened to Chelsea. But the point is that Moshiri, I suspect, still has the means to fund Everton, but not the desire.
Okay, so where and why... Okay, this is a better question. Why is nobody else wanting to buy Everton? Why are we getting to the situation where the people that are interested in buying them are someone like 7-7 Partners as opposed to someone who's got greater wealth and designs? Because it's a big club in a big city with a brand new stadium.
Yeah, I think is a good question. I'm sure there are other people interested, but maybe not at the figure that they will.
Quantum. If Moshiri wants £550 million and there's somebody prepared to do it at this stage, and he's not at the point where it's needs must, but wants to and would prefer to, and if this gets to the point where it has to, then the price will reach a different level. And there will be absolutely a buyer for Everton. Yeah. So absolutely.
Do you think that maybe we might see the emergence of new buyers once we know what happens next week, when we find out whether it's a financial penalty or a sporting one? Because your point about them staying in the league is fine unless they get a points deduction.
I think it makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense that
Have we got a precedent for anyone getting points deduction?
No, never.
And you're not going to get one now either.
Why?
Because they won't do it.
But even if there's a fine, I was going to say,
them.
but it depends on the size of the fine, how that impacts the club. Probably not greatly. I don't know what type of levels have been dished out before. What's the most that's been dished out before? Si, can you remember? Was it 10 million?
We haven't had anybody done for FFP before. This has never been happening.
Yes, you have.
City got done.
You've had Leicester City being done for FFP. You've seen, I think, other football
clubs. Not in the Premier League. That was in the EFL.
No, you have had Premier League clubs done for FFP.
Who?
I think Bournemouth have been done for
a fine of some sort recently.
Small beer. They have breached financial fair play and they've had consequences for it, and I'll find them in the break and tell you who they are. But the point is that there has been consequences. You might be right. It might well be that they've been in the Premier League when the offence has happened. They've dropped into the EFL, but they're still getting parachute payments, so they'll still be under the EFL's Premier League's guidance and governance to some extent. So with that in mind, there has been, and we've obviously seen FFP situations with Manchester City. We've seen them being fined in 2011 something like 50 million quid, which was reduced to 20 by UEFA as a result of better behaviour. So we have seen Liverpool have been fined for financial fair play breaches as well. By the Premier League.
They've been fined for FFP breaches.
Correct. Go look it up. We'll do it in the break and I'll prove it.
Cool. I'm surprised you didn't know about that, Sam. You know about most things.
I'm not sure it's the Premier League, but anyway, we'll argue about it in the break. But if you're an Everton supporter, how concerned would you be?
I think there's a desperation for stability and some light at the end of the tunnel, and an excitement to look forward and build something new. Most Evertonians want that, and I think they probably feel stuck in a rut at the moment with what's going on. I think they've got enough to stay in the league. I think they've got enough experience in the coaching department and on the pitch to stay in the league, even though it won't be easy. I think they'll do it. And that will give prospective buyers a much more attractive proposition than a club that gets relegated.
In terms of what they've got on the playing squad at this moment in time, you seem to be pretty convinced they'll stay in the league. Why are you so optimistic?
Just because there's so many bad teams.
There's so many bad teams.
Well, teams worse than them. Normally there's one standout or two, but you're looking at...
Are they a bit too over-reliant on Dominic Calvert-Lewin's fitness?
They're better with him, but I think bringing Beto in is gives them a physical presence up top if he's not there, although he's not quite got the quality Dominic Calvert-Lewin's got. So, yeah, I mean, everyone's relying on the best strikers being fit to a point. I just don't see them going down. Not with Dyche in charge.
This weekend they've got Liverpool. The gap is quite huge between the two of them. Is it one-sided?
Yeah, I think if Everton got a draw, they'd be cock-a-hoop.
I remember actually going with them to the game against Liverpool in lockdown, and they beat them there. And I spoke to Carlo Ancelotti afterwards, and I said to him, this is the first time you've won at Anfield since 1999. He went, not really. It doesn't really count this time because there's no one here.
Is that what he said?
It was quite a statement. But they don't win there very often at the best of times. Usually they're quite fierce games. You've been involved, I imagine, going to a number of Merseyside derbies. Has the atmosphere changed over the last 20 years? Because it was pretty good. I think it was where the whole city came together.
It did.
And it was deemed the friendly rival. In the 80s, they almost... I remember times they were sitting in the stands together, weren't they?
Well, I went... My first derbies, I mean... Yeah, it was very mixed. I remember being at the 4-4 and the replay at Goodison. I was on the Gladys Street with a friend of mine who took me, an Evertonian, and I had my Liverpool scarf on, no problem. Never, you wouldn't get that so much now.
No.
It has changed a little bit because the younger generation may be a bit more aggressive, a bit more tribalistic is probably a better word. But there are still people who sit together. They just don't make it as blatant. But Liverpool people do stick together generally. But I do think the game has taken on a bit more of an edge also because of Everton's
plight.
Yes.
In the interest of accuracy, you are right. Liverpool were investigated in 2014.
We were waiting for this.
Were investigated in 2014 and cleared in 2015 for overspending.
UEFA, though.
But they used it as infrastructure argument. Manchester United were charged and found guilty of FFP.
By?
UEFA,
yeah. Not the
but
Premier League,
still FFP.
Okay.
I mean, Everton can't be caught by UEFA's FFP because they don't play in Europe.
I know, but we were talking about
But
if
you stay long enough in the Premier League, you'll get a competition that means you'll be in Europe for finishing fourth and bottom.
Oh, right, okay. All right, so did you just admit
Look
you were
how
wrong?
happy he is. Look how happy
Did you
Sam
just
is.
admit you were wrong?
Yes.
Did you?
Wrong. I was
Do you know
absolutely
what?
wrong.
Do you know what? The
So
only thing would have made
2 strikes in 2 shows we've done together. So one more. You know
that was
what
great
happens,
last
don't
week,
you?
John, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but he hardly had the courage. You hardly had the courage of your convictions to go.
because
You
every-
didn't go with your
he
gut
didn't go in,
instinct.
did he?
To be
didn't go
fair,
in.
Should have went in.
Like I
heavy.
said before, every time he gets something wrong, it foxes me.
Yeah.
Because I think, really?
What's you?
It foxes
It
me.
foxes you.
Yeah.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.